Hello, good evening and welcome to your most authoritative business and economic analysis program live here on TV3. This is Business Focus. My name is Kwesi Asare. Thanks very much for making time with us on Constitution Day. So on Friday, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, announced that 23 banks had met the 400 million cedi capital required for commercial banks to recapitalize. Tonight, we want to find out what this means for Ghana's banking industry moving forward. What does it mean for both consumer and investor confidence? Tonight also, we'll be doing an analysis of the ownership of Ghana's banking industry. How many local participation vis-a-vis the foreign participation? And does it suit government's own agenda of having a lot more locals taking up the commanding heights of our industry? Tonight we'll do a lot more analysis on this program. This is Business Focus. We also have the Mover segment coming up shortly, as well as some analysis on the stock market as well as the commodities market. Stay tuned in. This is Business Focus. We'll be back shortly. Right, you're welcome back to Business Focus, your weekly business and economic analysis program live here on TV3. My name is Kwesi Asare. Let me just quickly introduce our guest in studio. Nanotu Champon is a banking consultant, and Mr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie is an economist, also a lecturer at the University of Ghana Economics Department. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and good to have you in studio, and happy Constitution Day to you.
Thank you. The same to you.
Have you been reading your Constitution?
I have.
Where have you gotten to?
I've finished page 1.
Page 1. I'm yet to start. Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I'll start off with you, Nana. So you have been following Ghana's banking industry for quite some time now, and I have seen you at virtually all the MPC meetings by the central bank. I need you to do an analysis of us, for us after the governor announced the number of banks that we are left with. Yeah. I need us to know the ownership structure of Ghana's banking industry.
Okay. We start by looking at when the reform started, and I predate that to 13th of August. Although the governor took charge on the 1st of April 2017, we saw the actual reform start on 14th of August. Now, when two banks were resolved, i.e. Capital and UT
right.
Bank. Before then, we had 36 banks. And so the two were resolved, and we ended up with 34. Now, at the time that we had 36, the structure was that Ghanaian majority shareholding banks were 19 against foreign of 17. So the ratio was 53% Ghanaian and 47% Ghanaian.
Sorry, 47% foreign.
Sorry, 47% foreign,
right.
Yeah. Now, when we moved to 14th of August and the two were resolved,
right.
then we came apart, 50-50. 17 Ghanaian owned and 17 foreign owned.
Okay.
Then we moved forward again to 1st of August 2018. And at that time, we resolved 5 banks and formed one new one.
Consolidated.
So we ended up with 13 Ghanaian owned banks and 17 foreign owned banks. And the ratio then became 43% Ghanaian and 57% foreign.
Right.
Then as of 4th of January, when we resolved it, then we ended up with 23 banks, of which 9 are Ghanaian majority holding and 14 are foreign owned. So the ratio has now reversed to 39, so call it 40% Ghanaian owned and 60% foreign owned.
So as it stands, we can authoritatively say that we have a lot more foreign participation in terms of the ownership than the Ghanaian ownership.
Yeah, that is in terms of numbers. Now we have to wait till maybe the end of the first quarter
to look at the value,
to see the balance sheet sizes. Because if you take one of the Ghanaian or majority-owned banks, it's 7 banks put into one. That is CBG, Consolidated Bank of Ghana. So 7 banks being put together, maybe they'll have such a huge balance sheet, but we have to wait to see the actual figures. Okay. So as it stands, yes, it's true, Ghanaian owned at 40% and foreign owned at 60%.
Okay,
yes.
So just repeat the figures. We've got 7 Ghanaian banks.
No, 9.
9 Ghanaian banks, making up 40%.
40%.
As compared to 14 foreign banks, making 60%.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I'll come back to you to look at the implications moving forward. Sarkodie, what is your own analysis of all that's happened and what portends for the industry?
The banking and insurance subsector of the economy has been growing negative for some time now. And I think that it was something worrying the economy. If you have an economy with a government in place which wants to move from taxation to production, if you want a government that believes in the participation of the private sector, remember that about 11.7 million Ghanaians who are employed, only about 680,000 are employed by government. The rest must find themselves in the private sector. So if the government believes in the private sector and the banking industry, which is supposed to fuel the private sector activities, is not doing well, then there's every concern to reform the sector. So I think that it was a step in the right direction. We did the right thing to reform the banking sector. We expect it to grow positive in the coming years. The other concern, as Nana said, about the ownership, if you have majority of the banking sector owned by, in terms of numbers owned by the foreigners, and I think that we should find ways of encouraging, because if the foreigners own majority in terms of the balance sheet, they still continue to own greater value of the balance sheet. That's yet to be determined. If they continue, that will worry us a lot, because we have always been talking about these multinational companies who are established in Ghana. They make profit, they repatriate the profit, and that affects the exchange rate. We've seen it going on. The cedi depreciates. Of course, we know that we import more than we export, but the short to medium term, strategies of arresting the cedi could be, enforcing the retention law. So, in ending my point on this note, once the Bank of Ghana has been able to take these bold decisions to reform the banking sector, because a number of decisions were really bold, and I commend the governor and his team for doing that. I also want to appeal to them to restructure or reinforce the retention law so that these multinational companies do not repatriate, greater part of their profit outside the country. They retain it in the country, to boost economic activities. Businesses will grow. We will have the city a bit stabilized in the medium term, and then we can move forward. So I want to see more Ghanaians. It doesn't matter the numbers, really, because, we're seeing countries who have, just about few banks in those countries, and they are doing well. So like Nana said, it is a matter of, not in terms of numbers, but it's a matter of the balance sheet. If only one bank or two banks are doing well in the country, then we have to go for it. And it's also good for the minimum capital. I don't know if it is our next point, but I can add it. The minimum capital requirement. You cannot be a commercial bank where we know your assets must be equal to your liabilities. You have your liabilities being the deposits from your customers, and your assets, the loans you give out, and the other things. If your assets go down and you're not able to shore up, then it becomes a problem for you. And most of the banks which were consolidated were going through that problem. So once you raise your capital, which will serve as a buffer, so that when you are in difficulties, you use your own capital to shore yourself up. And it also gives confidence to customers.
Sakode, I'll come back to you. Now, some have suggested that wholesale funding to banks is going to come under intense pressure moving forward. First of all, as a result of the reform, from a reform perspective, that is one, and simply as a result of shortage of funds.
Well, what do you mean by wholesale funding?
Essentially, funding that was available to commercial banks in the past would no longer be available. People wouldn't, want to put their monies in local banks.
Why not? Because as Sakode said, you see that you have to look at the structure of these 14 so-called foreign banks. And for instance, if Standard Chartered has been in Ghana since 1896, is it really foreign? It's Ghanaian. If you live in any country for over 100 years, So yes, the ownership is Ghanaian,
the rules of
but
naturalization.
the operations are exactly, Barclays has been here since 1917. So really, and then you go through, SG was really SSB, wasn't it? Social Security Bank, which was bought by Societe Generale, and they took it. Then Republic Bank was also HFC. So really, I won't discriminate on that basis that this is foreign, because after all, if they are all working very hard as they are doing, then they are providing employment for.
No, I guess a major fear
economy.
with that has to do with the repatriation.
But how much do they repatriate? But the majority is, after all, Ghana has set up a whole outfit called Foreign Direct Investment, GIPC. That all they do is to encourage foreign direct investment to come in. So therefore, if you've got companies, banks which are bringing money in, because when we ask for this capital, apart from one or two foreign majority-held banks, most of them got it in less than, Barclays, for instance, they had it even before the announcement was made. So therefore, I think as a free market economy, we have to go by the rules of the game. If you're a free market, then it means you set the rules, and whoever meet the rules, you accept, but not to do it on the basis of nationality.
Are you suggesting that with all these reforms that have gone on, there's simply nothing wrong with local banks, that suddenly confidence will be restored in the banking industry?
Yes, you see, because it was the survival of the fittest. And those which went down, the governor said over and over again, was primarily due to poor corporate governance. All the 13, is due to poor corporate governance. So therefore, if the governance structure as now has been issued in the Corporate Governance Directive dated December 2018, if that's implemented, then you have, because the Ghanaian banks that were well managed, well governed. They didn't have any problems. You know, you take the likes of Fidelity Car Bank and so on. There was no problem. But it was a poor corporate governance which allowed, say, one person to take decisions because erroneously they thought that this is my bank. But banking is regulated simply because the majority of the funds available to the bank is other people's money. If you take the typical capital structure of a bank, it's 17 to 83 in the sense that 17% is the bank's own equity capital. 83 is other people's money. You and I's deposit that is there. So really, that is the reason why the governments have interest in ensuring that depositors' interests are protected. And for that matter, you have to have a very good corporate governance structure in order that the shareholders do not take the depositors for a ride.
I need you to talk about consumer confidence in all this, the perceptions that have built out, you know, all this period when the Bank of Ghana has started its reform program. Because in somewhere 2009, there was a Nelson report survey that came up, and this was after a lot of the banking crisis in Europe. It showed that social media had already become the most dominant force in creating brand perception around trust. Now, and more recent surveys not only reinforce these trends, but show that no amount of traditional advertising can match social media in its ability to create or destroy brand perception. There's been a lot of argument on social media about banking in Ghana and about local banks. I mean, this perception out there, how do we rebrand it?
It will disappear just as it appeared, in the sense that it came about because you started the reform. Until, you know, I would say April 2017, it was like business as usual. Then the governor came in and realized that something had to be done. Something had to give way. So when he started with the resolution of the two banks on 14th of August 2017, that is where the snowball started. So then people were not sure, is my bank safe? Isn't my bank safe? That sort of thing. And it persisted all the way to 31st December 2018. So when, after the 1st of January, everybody was eager to hear from the government, from the central bank, what has become of this reform. How many banks have survived? And as soon as they gave that notice, the market stabilized, because now people know that either my bank survived or my bank didn't survive. The ones that didn't survive, I have to, you know, go and either take my money and go somewhere else. But the good thing about all this reform is nobody lost one penny. Yes.
So the real effect has been on shareholders. Shareholders, well, they have suffered the most.
I wouldn't even say they have suffered because since nobody lost anything, shareholders also didn't lose anything. But when you know, Sarkodie made a very good analysis when he said for a bank, your assets must equal your liability.
Right.
Now, where your liabilities exceed your asset, then what is the value that you have?
As a shareholder, so that's a question I asked. Right, okay.
So for a shareholder to say that, my bank has collapsed and there was a value. It's a value when the assets exceed liabilities, but if liabilities exceed assets, then there's no value. So in a way, it was good that, you know, the resolution came through, and now that it's been finished, it means restoration of confidence is going to come. And social media should start, you know.
They should start. You are saying that. Sak, I need I need your input on this shift in consumer behavior. Look, it cannot be business as usual. Banks certainly would have to find a new way of approaching customers, don't they?
This is the first step. This is one of the good ways of approaching the customers, because this is a list. I can see the list in front of Nana. We paste their list in newspapers, on social media. I see my bank's name, and I'm very confident. So the banks can approach customers with that kind of confidence that, look, I have recapitalized, I can meet the minimum requirement, I have enough funds, bring your deposits, bank with me whenever you need your money. I have enough money to, you know, give to you. So it is a good thing. A friend called me one day and asked if the bank that she was banking with is in the list. You know, and I checked it and I said, yes, it is. I said, okay, then my money is safe. So this is very good. If you can't meet the minimum capital, just go for. I remember somebody has been a bank's name has been removed. Yes, taken to savings and loan because you have to meet it. You need to buffer. You need to shore up the assets. Once the assets go down, you need money to shore up, and deposited need to have the confidence that when I come to your bank and I need my money, you're not going to tell me stories. We all heard of the story about this lady who was beaten in the banking hall by the policeman, and then other Ghanaians who rescued her, and some benevolent people gave her money and house or some of these things. So it is true that we need to restore the confidence in this thing. But the bankers do not also always have to concentrate on getting customers. I mean, asking Ghanaians to bank with them. It is true that greater part of our population is not banked. Last time I heard it about 30%, which I think that is quite low. But now, because of mobile money, so the dynamics are changing. Even though they are not banked, but they still have their money, on the mobile money wallet. So, but the banks, one of the key issues about this minimum capital requirement is that the banks should be able to, pre-finance certain projects. If we're a commercial bank and all you are interested in is buying treasury bills, asking customers to come and deposit their money with you, I don't think you are doing enough in terms of the economic activities. You should be able to pre-finance certain key projects. If government wants to construct a road from this end to that end, you should be able to pre-finance it. And then later on, government collects the tolls and then pays you.
Right.
The ID 1D, 1F is coming around. Government's intention is not to finance everything. Government is opening up to the private sector. If you are interested, Pakwesi, in one of these factories, you may go for a loan from the banks.
Right.
And the bank should have enough money to give to you.
I'll come back to you, Sarkodie. Nana, in the aftermath of this, we've seen the formation of the Fiscal and Stability Council. What does it mean?
Okay. Before I come to that, I wanted to follow on what Sarkodie has said. That is, the capital of the banks. I did a theoretical exercise where I said, okay, before 12th or 14th of August 2017, there were 36.
Right.
Of the 36, 26 of them were formed before 2014. And therefore, for those ones, the minimum capital was 60 million.
Right.
Those that were formed after 2014,
120. Right.
When you sum them up, you get 2.76 billion. That's what the funds available as capital to the bank.
Okay.
Fast forward to 31st December 2018, the number has shrunk by 36%, from 36 to 23. Of the 23, the minimum that each is supposed to have is 400 million. Multiply 400 million by 23. You get 9.2 billion.
Yeah.
You see a rise of,
and that is the minimum.
223%. So you can see that some good has come. That if nothing at all, as Sarkodie said, people want that confidence that if I leave my money with Bank A, and I want it tomorrow, I can get access to it.
Right. Tell me about the implication of the Fiscal and Stability Council.
Okay. Both have been established for specific purposes. The fiscal one has been established to bring more or less like policemen on the government, where income and expenditures balance. Because for a long time, we have seen that governments tend to overspend more than they have, and especially in election year. So this is supposed to check them to ensure that they do. And we are happy that the chairman is in the person of Paul Akwa, who is on record to have bounced government check when he was the governor of the central bank. That if you don't have money, I will not pay you on never basis. So now he's chairing that council to ensure that government spends within the target that they have set and don't overspend, because that dislodges the economy. The economists are there; they can explain. The second part, which is the Stability Council. Now, stability came in after the 2007-2008 financial crisis, where the World Bank, dictated that we should have proper stability to ensure that there's no dislocation between the economies versus the banking sector. So Bank of Ghana, for instance, has a stability department, and now they've pulled again 7 people headed by the governor himself, assisted by one of his deputies, to form that council to ensure that the whole financial system made up in Ghana of 4 parts, that is the banking sector, insurance sector, capital market, and the pension sector are always in balance with what is happening in the economy as a whole. So the 2 are very relevant, and once they can do the job that they're supposed to do, I'm sure we will all be winners.
Secretary, the Fiscal Council will have to monitor the performance of the government's budget with regards to compliance with fiscal rules and targets. And these targets include a budget deficit of not more than 5% of GDP as provided by law, a positive primary balance as provided by law, and a debt to GDP ratio of not more than 65% of GDP.
Yes, we are ending the IMF program, and most people were concerned about how government is going to discipline itself in the post-IMF era. So this is a clear indication of how the signal that we are sending to the whole world that we can discipline ourselves even without the IMF program, and that is a good thing. I've always told you that we don't need to mess up and go back to the IMF. So we need to discipline ourselves. I'm very happy about this council. Ghana has one of the best economic policies that you can think of in Africa. My problem has always been with the implementation. I want to see government, resourcing this council, because I don't want them to come and tell us they were not resourced, like the special prosecutor issue. So this is a special prosecutor in the fiscal side. They must be resourced, and they must really make sure that government discipline itself, live within your means. The public debt, we have talked about it. We have talked about stability, the fiscal deficit, we have talked about primary balance. So, because we need a certain amount of macroeconomic stability, and this council can help us achieve that, even without the IMF program, without any IMF program. Because IFS did some research recently, and they came out, one of the findings was that non-oil GDP growth rate is explained, just less than 2% of non-oil GDP growth rate is explained by capital expenditure, only less than 2%. However, about 18.3% is explained by inflation, and 18.3% explained by exchange rate. So macroeconomic stability is key to growing the non-oil GDP, which will eventually generate more jobs, because the oil, we have said that it has failed us. So if you want that sector to grow, then you need some amount of economic stability. So this council, ensuring that we live within our means, we do not have a budget deficit of more than 5%. We do not want to have more than 5%, keeping public debt, it is good. The issue about the public debt is that usually when I'm talking about the public debt, I'm not too concerned only about the debt to GDP ratio. I'm also concerned about the interest payment as a ratio of tax revenue. Because if you look at the debt to GDP ratio alone, you might think that it's going down, and therefore you're doing well. Of course, you're doing well on one hand. On the other hand, we must check our ability to service our debt, which is the interest payment as a ratio of GDP. Now, interest payment as a ratio of tax revenue, is about 42%. This year, we are going to spend 42% of our tax revenue on only paying the interest. We are paying interest of 18 billion Ghana cedis. Now, 18 billion Ghana cedis, if you are spending about 1.7 billion cedis on free SHS, and we are spending 18 billion cedis on interest payment, and you can imagine what 18 billion cedis can do for us if we were not paying the interest. So I expect government to really discipline ourselves in terms of borrowing, in terms of budget deficit, because the more budget deficit you have, the more you have to borrow, and it piles up the public debt.
It's exciting here you talk about macroeconomic indices, indicators, and all that. Yes. Over the years, Nana, the challenge has been these figures reflecting on the general well-being of the people. Today we have over 9 billion of funds lodged with commercial banks.
Yes.
Are we going to see interest rates go down?
Oh, definitely. Because if you trace the past 2 years, the benchmark, which is the MPC rate, has come down in the 20s to now 16%. Now, the transmission rate is not the same if it was the other way around. If it was going up, then the banks would immediately transmit. But when it's going down, because some of the makeup of the cost are fixed over the short to medium term, it means that it has to take a little bit while before it comes down. But generally, interest rates are coming down. And now we expect that with this sort of funds available, yes, banks will now have to find homes for those funds. They're not going to lock them up in the vaults. They're going to really put them out into creating assets by giving them out as loans.
I also need to find out from you, and it's all part of the public confidence, the consumer confidence we're talking about here. Look, there are still lots of prosecutions that are yet to happen.
Yeah.
With the measure, with the addition of Premium and Heritage Bank, government is going to issue, I think, a little over 1 billion of bonds to make up for the difference, the gap between the good assets and the liabilities. We're waiting to see prosecutions. What is happening?
Well, that one, we have to have the patience of Job,
Job?
Yes.
Job in the Bible.
In the sense that these things take a little while. They didn't happen overnight. It's gone on for years.
But this has got to do with the credibility of people. People's credibility.
Well, at least those banks have been taken off the scene. So if some of them were still in the list, then it will be a problem. And especially before 31st December, we weren't sure which bank was going to be in the list and which were out. So now that they're out, we've cleaned the list and we've got these ones left. Now, those prosecutions, let's leave that to the law enforcement agencies. And the governor, again, has said over and over again that, I mean, he is not a prosecuting authority. The prosecuting authorities are there. They have assured us, especially Yoko, which is the investigative arm. They said they are doing their investigation, but their primary objective is to get the money back rather than jail people. And therefore, so far, they've been able to recoup quite a lot of the money that went awry. So let's give them that discretion, and at the right time, if people have to, see, because some of these issues are civil offenses. The criminal offenses are less than the civil ones, and therefore with civil one, if it's restitution of the money, then it will come back. But the criminal ones, they might take longer because the proof is beyond reasonable doubt. And I'm not a lawyer, but the lawyers will tell you that usually it's more difficult. And so they need to gather evidence. And once they've got the evidence, then hey presto.
So you agree this is key to also improving consumer confidence in the banking industry?
Yes, of course. The Bank of Ghana has really shown an intention of protecting the consumer, because I've told you that most customers were so afraid on which bank to bank with. So now that the sanity has been restored, I think that it will boost consumer confidence. With prosecution, I'm not sure, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that, like Nana said, we should leave it to the law court, the lawyers to determine how it goes. But the most important thing is to also recoup the money and also serve as a deterrent. Now, what has happened, I'm not sure any Ghanaian bank or any even foreign bank would even attempt to repeat the mistakes of other banks. Now they will all be careful on how to give out loans and who to give to and how to transfer money and so on and so forth. So that point where it must prevent the future occurrences of this thing is very good. Now everybody is aware. we are all watchful, we are all careful about what we do. It is not just about adding numbers, it's not just about transferring money anymore, it's about, backing on prudence and then making sure that the right thing is done. So
let's quickly wrap up. So government is coming in to assist some 6 banks with through a special purpose vehicle. About 2 billion or so has been extended to these banks. Some have talked about how we're going to monitor these monies. Moving forward, issues of corporate governance, how do we deal with all these?
Well, in fact, it will be dealt with because the governor, again, has given the assurance that if they did sleep on the job or his predecessors did, he is wide awake. And therefore, the directive that, as I said, the final version was issued in December. And by 31st of March 2019, they expect compliance from each of the institutions. It only covers 2 sets of institutions, universal banks and savings and loans, stroke finance houses and financial holding. As of now, it doesn't cover rural banks, nor does it cover microfinance institutions. But for those that it covers, by 31st of March, they expect full compliance. And I think this will restore some sanity. They will ensure that the banks do comply with the best international practice standard, and with that confidence that has been very worrisome will be restored. People can now feel that, yes, they can put their money in a bank and they won't wake up the next day to find that it's been taken over, and then they have to queue for their money.
There's a law to check financial holding companies in terms of related party transactions and all that. How will this help? And really, can this be done?
Yeah, it can be done a lot. It will help a lot. We have international practices, and Ghana cannot be exempted. We have to emulate the good examples of other countries, and this governor is really doing well. My major concern has to do with, I'm sure he won't be in office forever. So if he leaves, then what next? So I am more concerned about the institutional capacity than the governor himself. So the governor is doing well. If he's able to build the institutional capacity so that even in his absence in future, when he leaves office, the institution as Bank of Ghana can still continue with this good thing that they are doing and making sure that there's sanity in the banking sector, then that will be good for the economy. My last touch will be on the exchange rate. Now, remember that when we were talking about the minimum capital requirement, they wanted it to be at par with $100 million. Now, the 400 is not equal to $100 million because the cedi has depreciated. So we must make sure the Bank of Ghana's responsibility, one of its responsibility is to ensure stability in the exchange rate. So they must also ensure that whatever measure that they must put in place to, ensure stability, they should do it so that we don't lose value in this minimum capital.
All right, gentlemen, I've got to say a big thank you to you. Thank you very much for joining me in studio. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie is an economist and also a lecturer at the University of Ghana Economics Department, and Nana Ochoa Champon, a banking consultant. They helped me to do the analysis of Ghana's banking industry and what the future looks like. Thanks also for listening and for watching. We'll take a short break. When we return, we've got the Movers segment coming up shortly. This is Business Focus.
Mover segment on the Business Focus. I'm Eben Ejekumbuati. Tonight we celebrate a young entrepreneur who is into an unusual business. He is into newspaper publication, and a very different kind of newspaper. Some say it's a game of chance or luck, but he thinks otherwise. Tonight I have with me the editor-in-chief and the owner of the Lotto newspaper, Lotto sponsor, Solomon Abuzo. Solomon, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for the time.
My thought is that, as other people, Lotto is a game of chance or luck.
Well, that is the perception out there. A lot of people think that Lotto is a game of chance. But I think it's not true. Lotto is mathematics.
It's mathematics. So you're saying Lotto, as we know it here in Ghana, has some statistical and mathematical influences.
A lot of calculations. A lot of calculations being programmed out there. That you can just mention a number and the number drops.
Okay. I know I've visited the National Lottery's operation room before.
Yeah.
They have balls with numbers on it.
Yeah.
1 to 90.
1 to 90.
5 of them will drop.
Will drop.
The odds are that, or the probability of winning, 5 over 90.
5 over 90.
It's just slim.
Very slim.
So what are you telling me? If I put 90 balls in the bowl, they are rolled up, and 5 of them will drop, then you're telling me it's mathematical.
You see this paper over here? This paper, the newspaper that you buy and then you watch inside. All the 90 numbers are on it.
On it.
They are on from single 1 to 90. They are all programmed on this newspaper. And so the program is on the paper, and you have to go and then forecast and get within the 90 numbers, get 5 of them or 2 of them that is going to drop. So when you maybe in the course of the interview, maybe you do some calculations, you do the working, and you get to know why I say Lotto is not just luck. But where we also think luck comes in is that maybe your mind or your eyes should be open to and then tilted, or your mind should go and then during the forecasting, you are able to detect a plan that will just maybe will work. But because Lotto has a lot of plans, so somebody can take the paper, maybe 40, this 44, somebody can see 44. Somebody else can see 89. 44 is the counterpart of 89.
I'm looking at the newspaper, Lotto sponsor.
Yeah.
A lot of numbers, they don't make meaning to me. How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this for the past 10 years.
You've been forecasting Lotto numbers for the past 10 years. Has this helped you and your clients?
If I want to talk about how Lotto has helped me, I can't just finish today. So I'll just maybe hammer on just 1 or 2 things. I finished SS, and my daddy was so sick at the time. So I was home, my result too was very good, and there was no helper out there. So one day I thought that, okay, then let me find something doing, and then I can go to school. So that is how come I entered into this. And I focused Lotto, and I've been to the university. I attended African University College of Communication Studies.
So you paid for your tuition?
I paid
with winnings from lottery.
I finished paying when I was in level 200, up to level 400.
So from 200, you paid the rest of your tuition
fee.
I've
also been to Legon to study African studies and history, but I'm not done.
You're not done. So you currently, the University of Ghana doing...
I'm not there currently, I've deferred.
You've deferred
to
concentrate on Lotto forecasting?
Yeah, just to have myself prepared very well before going back. Because when I went there, my daddy was not in a good condition at the time, so I had to give myself some time.
Now you've gone into publishing a newspaper.
Yes.
When I go out there and I pick a newspaper, a headline will attract me to read. But when I pick this, what is it telling me?
Well, you know, if you take a business newspaper, it attracts a certain category of audience. Certain people also attracted to a business newspaper. If you take sports newspaper, for example, a lot of people also buy based on that is their consumption. If you go and take Lotto paper, what attracts you? If you're not somebody who is a gambler, you're not a forecaster, it will not attract you. But people, because the paper is designed for a certain category of audience who are forecasters, when they pick the paper, they also know what they're looking for. For instance, the printing quality will invite the person to go and buy the paper. The arrangement of the paper will invite people to go and buy it. So it's not just for anybody, but for people who are forecasters, who are attracted to buy this paper.
What did you study in the university?
I studied communication studies.
Communication studies. This is a part of communication. But was this the initial business you planned doing?
I have not planned of doing this initially, but along the way, I have a registered business called Microcredit Services. I'm into money lending, and I've been doing that. So, you know, in Ghana, when you start business, financing it becomes difficult as a startup.
We will come to the challenges of startup business.
And so I thought that, okay, I've gone to do analysis about this, and I'm very good at forecasting. So why not go into publishing and use the money anywhere here to finance my microcredit business? That is how come I've started this.
Okay, so you're using the winnings from the lottery to finance your microfinance business.
Yeah.
And how is that one doing? The microfinance?
I've just started this. The microfinance business is doing well. But I realized that the financing is becoming difficult because the money to finance is from my own pocket.
Okay.
And so that is how I started this. And whatever comes out of this, I'll use to finance that.
Okay. So why are you doing the forecasting for people, right? You're now into doing it more for other people to get the numbers, to play and win, right? Why not do it specifically for yourself? That you work it out, you get it, and you play the lottery.
Interesting question. I've been doing this for the past 10 years and I've been focusing for myself. If you go to Kotobawi now, Newtown, Alaju, people know me over there for doing this. But the issue is that a lot of people call me during the day on my phone for numbers. So I thought that, okay, if people call me, I give them the numbers just like that. Then I can, if I publish this, I will just tell you to go and buy the paper and I'll make money from that one too. You understand it?
All right.
And so now when they call me, I say, well, now I'm producing the paper, I publish a paper. So you just go out where they sell the paper and go and buy one. And so at the end of the day, I'm making money from publishing the paper too.
You're still watching the Mover segment on Business Focus. Solomon, so what is the circulation of this Lotto newspaper?
Now, initially when you start, the minimum you can publish a week is 500 copies.
500
copies. You can't publish less than that. So if you publish 100 copies, they will still take the 600 from you. Okay. And that one. But for now, 500 copies, we are, if you go to other regions, Sogakope, Agbosome area, if you go to Takrady, you get it. If you go to Mankesin, you get Greater Accra region, we are all the Pokwase, everywhere we are there.
So are you doing this business, Lotto business alone?
I do it some. I have just two forecasters with
two other forecasters with you.
And who you know, this paper business, buying it or it's selling. Its sales depends on your figures that you put on it. So what sells the paper is your figures. If your numbers are dropping, people buy it a lot. Referral, they say some paper is out there, the numbers are playing. You see, the people will be in queue buying it.
What are the challenges in doing this business?
The challenges are just many. As a startup, if you're going to do, it's very capital intensive, very, very capital intensive. You can publish, let's say I spend the 600 Ghana cedis to publish this paper a week. When you start, maybe the sales that will be done, maybe at the end of the week, maybe you get only 200 cedis or 300 Ghana cedis. So the extra 300 cedis is a loss to you, the businessman. The vendors, they don't lose. But you as a publisher, you are just giving them the paper to go and sell. When you go, the number that they sell, they just bring that money to you. So when you publish 600 you use 600 cedis to publish it, and at the end of the day, they bring only 300 Ghana cedis. The loss, the 300 cedis extra is your loss.
There are a lot of young people who would want to start a business, but for one reason or the other, they are hesitating. What advice can you give them?
A lot of advice, pieces of advice for them. You know, the issue is that a lot of them are just not finding themselves. There are a lot of work out there, a lot of things out there that you can do. Just find yourself. I think that I went to one of the banks to just pay my tuition for Legon, and there's one student over there. When I was studying African studies. So when I went there, the guy said, I initially wanted to be an African studies student, but now I ended up being in a bank. So what I'm saying is that a lot of people out there are not doing the work that they're supposed to do, but because some of them are just chasing money. I work Lotto for fun. I work Lotto for fun. When I'm working Lotto, it's a pleasure for me to be working Lotto. Wow. Then I work with fun. I find my happiness in working Lotto.
You work, this is more statistical and arithmetic.
Yeah.
But we need a lot of math teachers in the secondary schools. Why are you doing this and not going to the Ghana Education Service to help?
Unfortunately, I'm not good in mathematics.
All right. Thank you so much, Solomon Abozo, for visiting us. It's been so wonderful speaking to him. I'm Eben Ejekum Boateng, and this has been the Mover segment on Business Focus. Keep watching Business Focus.
All right, thank you very much. That was Eben Ejekum speaking there to Mover of the Week. Well, that's how we conclude Business Focus here on TV3. Thanks very much for staying tuned in to us all throughout from 6 p.m. till now. My name is Pakwesi Asare. Hopefully, we'll be back again same time next week with another edition of your favorite program, Business Focus. Stand by now for the news at 7 with Alfredo Kanse and Natalie Ford.